I still remember the smell of smoke that night, the way it curled into the cold air and clung to my skin like guilt I hadn't earned. The house I built with love, with laughter, with dreams, was gone. Flames ate through the walls like they had waited all their lives for this moment. And in the middle of that orange storm, I saw her, my daughter, Emily, her face frozen between rage and regret. The night was still except for the crackle of destruction. My hands trembled as I stood by the fence, watching everything I'd worked for turn to ash. The curtains I sewed by hand, the rocking chair where I fed her as a baby, the photo frames that once held our smiles, all swallowed by fire. Neighbors gathered, whispering, eyes flicking between me and the inferno. I heard words like accident and insurance, but none of them mattered, because deep down, I knew this wasn't an accident. Emily's anger had been growing for months, her voice sharper, her visits colder, but never, not once, did I believe she would cross this line. As the firemen arrived and pulled me back from the smoke, I caught sight of her silhouette standing across the road. She didn't move to help. She didn't cry. She just stared, her eyes like two broken pieces of the girl I once raised. Later that night, after the flames died and the air was thick with ashes, I sat on the curb in my nightgown, a blanket draped around my shoulders. A young officer came to me, asking questions. "Mrs. Agnes, did you notice anyone around? Do you have enemies?" Enemies? I almost laughed. The only person who could destroy me was the one I loved most. When they finally let me back near the house, there was nothing left but blackened bones of wood and twisted iron. I stepped over the ruins. Every crunch of ash beneath my feet felt like stepping on old memories. My knees gave out near the kitchen, where the scent of burnt sugar and memories made me dizzy. I whispered her name into the smoke, "Emily!" But the air gave me no answer. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat outside, staring at the skeleton of my home, replaying every moment. The first brick my late husband had laid, the birthdays, the laughter, the lullabies that once filled the rooms. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the heartbreak and betrayal, a strange feeling began to grow. Not anger, not hate, but sorrow. Because I didn't just lose a house. I lost the bond that once made life worth living. I didn't know it then, but this fire was not the end. It was the beginning of the hardest and perhaps the most meaningful journey of my life. Morning came heavy, like the world had forgotten how to breathe. The smoke still hung in the air, and the ashes of my home lay quiet under a gray sky. I sat in the back of a police car, wrapped in a wool blanket, answering questions that broke my heart in ways the fire never could. "Do you know who could have done this, Mrs. Agnes?" The officer's voice was gentle, but his eyes were searching. I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect her the same way I'd done since the day she was born. But lies taste bitter when you're old and tired. So I said nothing, just stared out the window where the remains of my life still smoked. When they finally drove me to the small motel on the edge of town, I walked in like a ghost. The room was simple. One bed, one chair, one mirror that I couldn't look into. I sat there for hours, replaying the same question in my mind. Why would my daughter do this to me? Emily wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, she was my sunshine, all curls, giggles, and endless questions about the stars. When her father died, she was only 12. I held her every night while she cried into my chest, whispering that we still had each other. I thought that love would be enough, but as the years passed, grief hardened her like stone. She wanted more, bigger dreams, faster money, a life that didn't smell like old wood and homemade bread. I understood. Every mother wants her child to reach higher. But when she met Richard, everything changed. He was smooth-talking, sharp-dressed, the kind of man who made promises that felt like gold but turned to dust the moment you touched them. He saw the house as old property, a waste of potential. He whispered in Emily's ear that she could sell it, buy her dream home, live free. But that house wasn't just wood and brick, it was our history, our heart. I refused. That refusal, I now know, was the spark that lit the fire long before the flames ever did. That evening, as I sat in that lonely motel, a knock came on the door. My heart jumped. For one wild second, I thought it was her, coming to apologize, to cry in my arms like she used to. But it wasn't Emily. It was Officer Mills again, holding a folder in his hand and pity in his eyes. "Mrs. Agnes, we've reviewed the footage from a nearby camera." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I nodded. It was her, wasn't it? He looked away. That silence was my answer. For a long time, I just sat there. The clock ticked. The air hummed. I felt the world fall away until it was just me and the sound of my own heart breaking. That night, I didn't cry. Tears felt useless, like pouring water into fire long after the embers had gone cold. Instead, I picked up my old notebook, the one I used to write grocery lists and lullabies in, and began writing something else. A letter. "My dearest Emily, you took my home from me, but you didn't take my memories. You burned the walls, but not the love that once filled them. I don't know what pain led you to this, but I hope one day you'll remember who you were before anger took you away. You were my baby. You still are. Mom." I left the letter on the nightstand. I didn't know if I'd ever send it, but writing it felt like breathing again. When I finally closed my eyes, I saw the flames, but behind them, I saw her as a child chasing butterflies in the garden that no longer existed. And I realized something painful and beautiful all at once. Even if my daughter burned my house to the ground, she could never destroy the part of me that still loved her.
It took 3 days before I saw Emily again. The fire had taken everything, not just my home, but my sleep, my peace, my appetite. Every sound reminded me of crackling wood. Every flicker of light made me flinch. But somewhere deep down, I knew I couldn't live the rest of my days haunted by questions. I needed to see her. I needed to know why. So, I walked. The air was still heavy with the scent of smoke, and the autumn wind stung on my face as I made my way toward her house, a big, cold place with white walls and no soul. When she opened the door, the color drained from her face. "Mom," she whispered, her voice caught between guilt and disbelief. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who ran into my arms after thunderstorms. But then I saw the woman she'd become, distant, restless, wearing pain like perfume. "Can I come in?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. Then she stepped aside. Inside, everything was neat and perfect, yet lifeless. The ticking clock was the only sound between us. I took a seat on her sofa, the same way I once sat on the edge of her childhood bed, waiting for her to talk. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." Her hands trembled as she poured coffee, her eyes refusing to meet mine. Richard said we could make it look like an accident, that the insurance money would help us both. But I didn't think it would spread so fast. My chest tightened. You set the fire, Emily. You. I didn't light it, she shouted, her voice breaking. He did. I just let him. Silence fell heavy between us. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing the windows, and somewhere far away, my own heart cracking again. He left, she said. After the fire, he ran, took the money. The police can't find him. She sank to the floor, clutching her face. I've lost everything, Mom. Everything. For a moment, I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream, to demand why she traded love for greed, why she let the man she trusted destroy everything we built. But when I looked at her, broken, crying, alone, I didn't see a criminal. I saw my child, lost in the flames of her own mistakes. I knelt beside her and took her hands. They were cold, shaking. Emily, I said softly, I lost my home, but I won't lose you too. She looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. How can you still love me after what I did? Tears finally came. They burned more than the fire ever could. Because I'm your mother. And a mother's love doesn't die, not even in the flames. For the first time in years, she leaned into my arms. We sat there on the floor, holding each other, sobbing quietly. Two hearts scarred by the same fire, yet still beating for forgiveness. When I left that day, I didn't look back. I knew rebuilding wouldn't mean just walls and windows. It would mean rebuilding trust, piece by fragile piece. As I walked away from her house, I whispered to the wind, "You can burn a home, but you can't burn a mother's love." And for the first time since the fire, I felt peace flicker, small but alive.
Time moves differently after loss. Days blur, nights stretch, and every small sound feels louder, sharper, as if the world wants you to notice it's still there, even when everything you loved is gone. The weeks after the fire were heavy, but quiet. I stayed in a small cottage the church offered me. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof that didn't leak. But somehow it felt enough. Maybe because it was a place where pain could breathe and peace could visit without fear. Emily came by every few days. At first, she'd stand at the door, unsure if she should come in. I could see the shame in her eyes, the way she couldn't look at me without tears rising. But I didn't push her away. I'd lost too much already to let pride steal what little we had left. One afternoon, she arrived holding a box. Old photo albums, half burned but still precious. She said softly, "I found these in the remains. They survived somehow." We sat together on the floor, turning the pages slowly. The edges were blackened, the pictures faded, but each one was a heartbeat of the past. There was one photo of her as a child, 5 years old, wearing her father's hat, her eyes bright as sunshine. I touched that photo gently and smiled. Fire can take almost anything, but not this, not love, not memory. She looked at me then, tears spilling freely. Mom, I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I smiled faintly. Don't spend your life on guilt, Emily. Spend it on kindness. That's how you repay love. And she did. Slowly, she changed. She found a small job at the local shelter, helping women who'd lost their homes, perhaps trying to heal herself by helping others rebuild. I saw light return to her eyes, not all at once, but like dawn breaking after a long night. Months later, I stood in front of a half-built little house on a quiet hill, my new home. The community had come together to help rebuild it, plank by plank. When the last nail was hammered in, I didn't cry for what I'd lost. I smiled for what I'd found. Strength, forgiveness, and a bond that no fire could destroy. That evening, Emily came with a bouquet of wildflowers, her voice trembling as she said, "Welcome home, Mom." And in that moment, I realized something simple yet profound. Love isn't measured by the things we build, but by the hearts we rebuild when everything's gone. I took her hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered, "You burned my house, my dear, but you rebuilt my soul." The sun dipped low behind the hill, painting the sky gold. The wind carried the scent of new wood and blooming hope. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole again. Because forgiveness, I learned, isn't about forgetting the fire. It's about remembering that love still burns brighter.